Build creative confidence. Beat the inspiration addiction. Join the Writer's Gym.
Hello everybody, welcome back to the Writer's Gym. This is Rachel Knightley, PT, coach, author. I am here today with Lavie Tidhar. Lavie's work encompasses literary fiction, Maror, Adama, Golgotha and Six Lives, cross-genre classics such as Jerwood Prize winner A Man Lies Dreaming and World Fantasy Award winner Osama, and genre works like the Campbell and Neukom winner Central Station. His work has been translated into multiple languages. He lives in London. Lavie, I think that may be one of the more modest biogs, given its content, that I've ever seen. One detail I'm going to throw in there is when you won that World Fantasy Award, you beat Stephen King and George R.R. Martin, didn't you?
I don't think they were bothered, I have to be honest. I came back from Canada on the plane and the woman next to me was reading Stephen King just as a sort of, reminder of who's top dog.
Keeping you in your place. I will start with a personal favourite, The Big Blind, which begins in a room playing poker. And this young woman gets underestimated the way young women do, wins the poker game. And then as she walks out of the room, you find out as she puts back on her headpiece that you find out she's a nun. I fell in love with that scene because it threw so many of our expectations in our faces. Is that something that was on your mind with that? Or how did you come in with that?
I think this is actually the first time I ever got asked about The Big Blind. So
really?
This is very exciting for me. It started off as an idea, basically, rather than as a book. It's almost started off as, I just saw it as a film in a way, like a feel-good film. My whole idea was I love poker and I thought it could be like Rounders meets Sister Act, that was it's a ridiculous idea. Most of my ideas are ridiculous. So I ended up sort of writing a full synopsis of it, which I don't usually do, but I basically wrote down the story and the characters before ever writing the story. And the problem is eventually no one actually wanted to make it into a film. And I thought, I might as well write it. I've got the whole outline of it. The writing surprised me because it doesn't quite come out. The style of it is very sort of minor and direct, I guess you would say. So it's just it's not show-offy. And of course it evolved quite a lot in the writing, and it's really about faith, isn't it? And about where you fit and so on. So it's a book I really like. I tell you what though, I got 2 reviews for it that I really like. Because firstly, it's about poker, which I don't really know much about. I'm a huge fan of watching poker, but I can't play. So my research involved spending 2 weeks online playing poker at the lowest possible level just to get the feel of it, And I was earning a bit of money. Like I started with like a $20. After 2 weeks, I got to $40. I doubled my money. I was like, whoa. And then someone sent me a payment for a reprint for a story, and that was $80. And I thought, what are you doing? What are you doing? Get to work. So one thing is about poker, which I don't really know. And the other one is about Irish nuns, which I don't really know.
But were those the ideas that just came along? That was what spoke to you? That was what the story said it was?
Yeah, that seemed to work. What I'm saying is, so I had 2 reviews. I had one review from a poker guy, and he said, you can see he doesn't really know poker. But for a guy who doesn't know poker, he gets most of it right, which I thought was great. And then there was a review from an Irish reader, and she said, I hate it when, people write about Ireland and they don't know anything about Ireland. And I went in expecting to hate this book. And she said, you know what? I didn't hate it as much as I thought I would, which I thought was a great compliment because, when you're writing about things you don't really know much about, or you're doing your research, you're doing the best you can. But ultimately, if someone has a criticism of you, that criticism is probably valid, and you have to kind of accept it. So I was quite pleased that it wasn't hated as much as she expected to hate it. And I got most of the poker right. And I think, in a way that doesn't matter to the story, does it?
No. And also, I'd like to know if this is how you see it, but sometimes the ideas come along and you don't quite know why it's that thing yet. And when you do the research and when you keep telling yourself the story, you end up knowing why it's poker, why it's nuns, why it's Ireland. But you can't know that at the beginning. So for me, the difference is between, do people bother to find out why they want to use that thing and not? And for me, that's where the sensitivity aspect comes in. That if somebody knows why they are telling the story, then it's not gratuitous. It's not there just as earrings to the story. It's identity. It's authentic. Is that where you are on that?
Well, I mean, you strive for it, but you're always going to get bits wrong, you know. I actually ended up writing about Ireland a couple more times. And, that's a tricky thing to do in a way. I have a whole section set in Ireland in 1910 or 1912 in Six Lives. And again, I was quite worried about it because ultimately I'm not Irish. I haven't lived in the 1910s. Maybe it helps that it's in the 1910s. And again, it's about a woman who just wants to get out of Ireland, basically. And, I was in some small town in Ireland a few months ago, and I wandered into a bookshop and I had 2 copies of the book on the shelf, which are the only 2 copies I've ever seen on the shelf. So I thought, okay, maybe I didn't get it not entirely wrong. But I think, we're dealing with universal concerns. You're not writing about identity, you're writing about people. And people are the same wherever you go. There's a very good Scottish, gangster series of novels that I was reading recently. And again, one of the things he did was it's set in Glasgow, but it's not specifically, he's not going around giving you a tour of the city. He's just writing about gangsters, and I thought that's what you do.
And that's the balance, isn't it? It's doing enough research that it is legitimate, but also not throwing the research all over everybody's heads going, look how much I know, letting the story tell itself.
Yeah, all you really need is one detail that makes it look as if you're an expert and you know everything, and it sells the whole illusion of it. I had the same thing with my King Arthur book, by Force Alone, which is a ridiculous book. Absolutely ridiculous.
I have never known anyone to insult themselves as liberally as you do.
I am not using that as an insult. I like writing ridiculous things that shouldn't work, But people assume that I'm an expert on Arthurian literature, and I loathe Arthurian literature.
Oh, interesting. So why and how did that happen then?
Well, I tend to write about the things that annoy me anyway. So I write a superhero novel because I hate superheroes. I hate the whole nonsensical thing of it. I wrote a book I really love called The Escapement, which is about clowns, and then I realized everyone hates clowns, which didn't even occur to me when I wrote it. I have to admit, I thought people like clowns. What's wrong with clowns? So I do tend to do those things. And the problem is, of course, people who love superheroes or Arthurian fiction won't really like these books. And the people who don't like superheroes and Arthurian fiction won't pick up the book because they assume it's a stupid thing to do. But yeah, people just kind of assume there was some expert on it because I cited some sources, but you get what you need and you get out. You don't stick around. You're an expert for 5 seconds. That's what it is.
With me picking my favourite of your books, I feel like I'm tempted to ask you that worst question in the entire world that I would not normally ask anybody for love nor money, which is, do you have a favourite, or was there something either that was most fun to write or that you're most proud of?
Yeah, I mean, I still think, and this is actually why I had a massive crisis as well at some point. A Man Lies Dreaming, which is probably, and we're talking about ridiculous books, or, it's a book about Adolf Hitler as a private detective in 1930s London. The way I describe it's a very funny book about the Holocaust. It's a terrible, and if anyone else had written it, I'd be very offended.
It's one of those things that sometimes I have conversations with you and the thoughts, I'm really glad we're both Jewish and having this conversation, because if we weren't, we wouldn't be having this conversation, go through my head. And I'm now conscious I'm about to broadcast one of those conversations.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, I feel like I just about maybe get away with it. But that's a book that I didn't even hate writing it. I enjoyed writing it, but I had to write it really quickly because I was spending so much time inside Adolf Hitler's head. Seriously, I was surrounded by Adolf Hitler. I knew what books he read. I knew about his childhood. I knew everything there was, and it's a very unpleasant place to be.
What was the need, or what was the idea or the question that brought you to that?
It just got sparked off by a random line in a Philip Kerr novel that he kind of has a throwaway in one of the Gunther books about basically that. What if Hitler was a private eye? I think it's somewhere now. I just read it at like 1:00 at night in a cold flat when I came back to the UK, and it was just ping. But the other element of it was having come back to the UK in end of 2010, I think. I realized how much the country has changed in the meantime, and it was just the UK. It was across Europe as well. But I suddenly felt it, having been away for so long, that rise of the right, the xenophobia, just the misery, it was the financial crash and all the rest. All the conditions were there. So it was never the idea, okay, I'm going to write this ridiculous concept. It was, I'm going to write a serious book about the things that I'm feeling now using this ridiculous concept. And what I wasn't expecting is how much the book was going to predict what was coming. That's what I wasn't prepared for. It was a nice piece of fiction when I wrote it. And then 2 years later, Nigel Farage delivers a speech after Brexit that was almost word for word the speech that I wrote for Mosley in A Man Lies Dreaming. And then you get Trump a bit later. And again, there's echoes from the book. So that's a book that I am still very, very proud of, and also just enjoy for the sheer outrageousness of it. But also because I thought, okay, I've written my masterpiece at this point. I've written this one book that if you're going to write one book, that's the book you're going to write. What do I do? Like how? I don't know what to do after this. I don't know how to top it. I don't know how to do. So what do I do? And it was about 2 or 3 years of absolute struggle trying to find my way back into some sort of place where I just didn't know what I was doing. I was very lost with it. And the book that sort of got me out of it, which is the other book that I'm very, very fond of, is The Escapement, which is a surrealist quest journey of a man searching for a cure for his dying son's illness, basically, but in a fantastical surrealist world populated by clowns and inspired by the Wild West. Basically, imagine a child's bedroom with cowboy outfits and clowns, and that gets turned into this fantasy. So it's, again, another very ridiculous book, but it was also completely different. It had no politics in it, which in my other books had in spades. It was this fantasy. It was surrealist. It was serial, which was something that I was beginning to experiment with and came in really handy when I was writing the other books after that. And it just got me out of it because I thought, okay, you don't have to stick to what you were doing before. You can do new things and they'll be great as well, ideally.
Can I ask you a bit about that? Because I think that's something that everybody at some level struggles with, whether they've done, bugger all, or whether they've got a back catalogue like yours. We will sometimes need to trip over where we've got a lack of permission from ourselves. And it's really interesting hearing you give that example that, where do I go from here? And then actually you found a way through that. Is that something that you've thought about? Where do I go, or permission to write? What can I write? Where do I go next?
Well, partly you just have to figure it out. But I think for me, because I'm guided by the idea, I think a lot of people won't publish or won't finish something because you want it to be as good as you can make it, right? And that's where you go wrong. Perfection is the enemy of good, of publishing in general. And so I'm aware that, it's never going to be perfect. And I think that's partly the charm of what it is. It's supposed to be perfect. It's supposed to be a little bit rough and a little bit lumpy and a little bit not quite working. Otherwise, we'll never publish anything. So maybe I'm just pleased to just put out any old rubbish out. But I'm having it even now because I spent the last year writing a giant space opera for fun. As I'm writing it, I'm thinking this is the greatest space opera I've ever written. Everything I'm doing is absolutely brilliant. And now I'm in the process of having to read through it and edit it before I can send it to the publisher. And I hate every single thing about the book. All I can see is the imperfections, the bad, and it's painful. It's absolutely painful. And you just have to believe it's good enough.
Yeah, that's it, isn't it? We just have to believe it's good enough because that phase comes in, doesn't it? We've gone from, if we're lucky, a first draft of these ideas are wonderful, to coming back over it going, the things I need to sort out are so big that I can't even see the joy right now.
Yeah, I get it with poetry. You read a real poem, and you're just filled with envy at someone who can write something that is so much better than what you could do. It's very frustrating. I think that's why I went into fiction. It's easier.
But it's also about different voices. I'm laughing because I remember when I first met my partner, I was describing why I thought a film we had seen didn't work. And I must have been talking for 3 minutes straight. And I turned to him and just sort of said, "Do you sort of feel something?" "Yeah, it was just shit." And somehow that was truer than everything that I had just said.
Sometimes things are bad. What you do is you don't show people that. It's easier when you're a writer. I mean, if you've spent $1 million making a low budget, terrible film, you've still spent $1 million. If you've just written a bad story, it just sits in the folder marked "bad stories don't show anyone."
Okay, I need to know, do you have a folder like that?
Yeah, no, I've got loads of them. I've got so much stuff. Sometimes sometimes I don't even remember I wrote something, and you're like, what? Why are you? What? And also, what I do, because I hate cutting things. I hate rewriting, and I hate cutting things. And of course, you have to. And so the trick is to basically never delete it, but just to put it into what I call a cut file. So I just, as soon as you cut it, you forget about it immediately. But it's just that psychological thing that I can't bring myself to delete it. The world needs to see, one day the world needs to see this terrible thing that I wrote. So it goes into a cut file and never gets seen again.
That's like my free range chickens thing that I mean, I'm the same as you. Most things that I cut will stay cut. But just occasionally I have gone back and it has found a home somewhere else. But the way that I was always talking to myself is, you don't show animals you love them by keeping them all in the one enclosure. That's not loving them. You take them out, you put them in their own Word document where they could run around properly. So for me, it's about free range words.
That's a good way of looking at it. Yeah. They're living in a farm somewhere upstate.
Yeah, we haven't cut this paragraph. It's just got a way to live on a farm.
It's true though. You feel kind of attached to it still, don't you? You don't want it to just die. But you're right. A lot of the times you're reusing that stuff years later. Maybe it was bad, but it leads to something. I mean, I did a book called The Circumference of the World, and that took years and years of versions and rewrites and edits, and no one quite knew what to do with it. And I actually turned down a publishing deal for it when in the original version, and the version that actually came out years later is almost completely reworked. Absolutely not worth all the effort, by the way, that I put in. If you ask me, but
it depends on your definition of worth, doesn't it? Because a lot of people would just go, "Oh, I have an opportunity, off it goes." If for whatever reason that's not right for you, that's a very brave decision to make.
The thing was, that book itself was built from the corpses of 2 other books that were not good, So, I mean, I have several novels on the hard drive that are just not very good.
Or just haven't found their soulmate novel yet.
Yeah, but they have good things in them. And so with The Circumference of the World, it used the good bits from those books that didn't work, and it finally managed to use them in a way that was good. And I've got one, in my Central Station universe, which I've been writing for, like 20 years. There's one novel that was never published because it's just not very good. It's just something I wrote as almost an exercise thing. But the stuff in it serves as background for quite a lot of the stuff I have done. So it's kind of referencing a book that no one has seen but me. But it's proven very, very useful, that book, over the years. I've been using it in the animation stuff I do as well. So they always find a way back.
It's almost like a foundation stone, isn't it? That all of the other stuff you've built off that, but maybe they'll only ever see the thing that started it when everything else is already out there.
Yeah, and you don't need to see it, do you? I mean, It's kind of like with John Wick, where the first film, it's so much fun because there's a hint of this weird world going on in the background, but we don't know anything about it. And then the next few films, they're like, well, let us explain to you where this gold comes from. And it's not interesting. No one cares where the gold comes from.
Yeah.
Oh, some guy in Morocco is making the gold coins. Okay. Like, how is that good? So it's about, giving people the illusion that there's more stuff out there rather than telling them all the stuff that's out there. And people always say, if they say, I wish this book was longer, they don't actually mean it. Because if the book was longer, it would be, let me explain to you where the gold coins come from. And they're like, oh, that's a bit rubbish.
Yeah, they just need to read slower. Are you a writing from home enthusiast, or do you go to somewhere else to write? What's your sort of...
No, home, definitely.
Yeah.
Sofa or bed or anything comfortable. I tried working in a coffee shop once and it drove me insane. I hate people, as you know. I hate people, so being surrounded by them is the worst thing. And I need quiet. I just need silence. Working at night is better for me.
So you're an absolute silence person, no sort of familiar sounds or...
No, I'm happy with noise that's not generated by other people.
I'm just fascinated with the noise thing because I'm more like what you're describing now. But certainly when I was younger and maybe my attitude to home or how I felt about being at home was different, I found coffee shop noises were quite reassuring because it wasn't to do with me. It wasn't my problem. I was sort of cocooned in this. And it kind of did for me what I think silence or familiar music, which is what I will use, now does for me, which is that sort of the washing machine going on in the background sort of feeling that it's just there. It's holding me in place. Whereas I can completely see how other people's noise could just be really, really irritating.
Actually, I hate the washing machine.
It's just distracting hate.
It's distracting, yeah.
And you have wind chimes. You have wind chimes outside.
Yeah, they drive me insane, yeah.
Are you in the room that you write in now, or are you somewhere else?
Editing.
You have an editing room?
Room is a very big word. Yeah, I've got a desk where I can occasionally get to sit down and do some editing and emails. Writing, I'll just use whatever soft surface there is. But I used to, when I was working, I used to just write wherever I had a computer in front of me. And I've certainly met people like Philip Kerr, who I mentioned before, who could take his laptop out in the middle of the airport or wherever he was, whatever time, he would just take his laptop out and start writing. It was incredible. I wish I could do that.
I've become less in favour of the outside world when it comes to writing over the last few years, but I can use it as a treat sometimes. I think it does depend on a lot of things, but I love that you've got different islands for editing and essentially admin, I think.
It's more like having a small space and just trying to fit yourself where you can. But also, I have that separation between sort of daytime work and night work, or between, different parts of the brain. So if I have to do more editing, emails and forms and all that, I do that in the day. And the writing, I need that silence. So
are you a late night creative brain?
Yeah, but I mean, sometimes I'll do it during the day. It just depends. But I definitely find, I wouldn't be able to edit at night, for example.
I can't edit once it starts getting dark. I'm like some sort of small mammal that once it's dark, something in my brain knows this is not for me now. The editing goes. I can throw ideas down, but I cannot edit the darker it gets.
Maybe it's because editing is for the outside and writing is for you, editing is for someone else. So that's, again, the inside-outside thing.
Yeah, it's almost a translation mechanism from inside your head to the world.
At the moment, it's very painful.
Is it?
Well, I wrote a giant book, and the problem with writing a giant book is that then you spend a giant amount of time going over it. So that's never doing it again.
Given that we're recording you saying I'm never doing it again, do we think that in 2 years, 3 years' time, you're going to listen to that?
Well, there's something very appealing about writing an epic, isn't there? There's something appealing about having a huge statement on a shelf that's 700 pages or whatever it is. But on the other hand, it's absolutely ridiculous. I like short books. I like short stories. What I really enjoy doing is short stories more than anything, or short books. But there is something appealing about that big, definitive sort of looking hardback on a shelf. And then you realize no one actually, reads them.
And then people like me want to talk to you about the novellas.
Which is good. I never get to talk about the novellas. And that's my favorite form of writing, is the novella. But you know what? it wasn't last year, I think the year before last, I finished a book. And I ended up writing 3 novellas, one after the other, knowing that this is the stupidest thing you can do.
Stupidest in the sense of commercial?
You can't publish them.
Yeah.
And I wrote 3 novellas and I was so pleased with them. It really is the best format, I think. It doesn't waste any space. It doesn't have any fat on it, but you still get to tell a story that goes on long enough, And I think I published 9 novellas up to this point. And again, they don't get anything. You're lucky if you get one in a magazine or if you get a tiny small press book or something, but they don't make any sense in terms of publishing. I don't even understand why, because they should be ideal for
with people's attention spans shrinking. You'd think, if anything, people would like that format more than they did.
Yeah, I mean, even the Booker Prize, if you saw the last few years, they've had some short, because they used to go for the big definitive epics, didn't they? And suddenly they went, okay, really small books are good. So you keep thinking there might be a renaissance of short books again. I think now maybe with printing costs, we might get some short books again. That'll be good.
Are you going to keep pushing?
I think this year I'm only going to do short stuff. I spent a whole year writing this space opera, and I mean, it's just...
You owe yourself novellas.
I can't take it seriously. It's like, it's aliens and spaceships. It's ludicrous.
Are there times when you do struggle to find the attention, the pushing through? What do you sort of do with yourself if you are struggling to make the writing happen?
Firstly, I struggle with it every day. I spend 99% of my time not doing anything, or not writing anyway. I mean, the writing basically takes, if you're lucky, you'll get 20 minutes where you get some writing done at the end of the day.
And then you've got the landing pattern around it, the circling.
It's kind of like you finally got to the point where you can write and then you have to go to sleep, and then you're like, but I could have kept going. I could have finally there, I finally found a moment. I mean, one thing I do when I get stuck is cook. I suddenly become obsessed with having to cook like 3-4 dishes in the kitchen, like elaborately as possible. And then I'm done. I think, what were you doing? What are you doing? Well, no one's going to eat this. It's kind of like, why did I just stand up here chopping onions for hours? But it's very therapeutic. Or, long walks or just being outside.
I don't know that this is the reason, but one of the things that those have in common is it does bring you very much back into the body, into the here and now, rather than into your head and the world that only you can create. You're back in the physical world.
Well, in body anyway.
In body anyway.
Kind of staring at the ducks in the park, thinking about clowns or whatever. But yeah, I really think people overestimate how much writers actually do. I mean, at least in my case, it's more like, can I watch 6 hours of TV to get 20 minutes of writing done?
And yet you have a space opera.
I know.
So it works.
Because you don't have to write a lot. That's every day, you just have to write a little bit every day. And that's what I discovered, actually. And that's what I was saying when I wrote The Escapement and I did the serial thing, which is, my strength is really in shorter form. But what I discovered is that I can make very long works out of small blocks. And so that's what I did when I went to Write by Force Alone, the Arthurian book. That's when I really realized that I can take what I learned from The Escapement and I can do it in this book, which anyway, you need that sort of panoramic mosaic form to tell the story of, the Holy Grail and King Arthur and so on. And so they're really made out of small blocks, and each block is a perfectly self-contained, very lean story in itself. So you're not adding any fat to it. You're not bloating this whole thing, but you can still string them along into quite a long book. And that's what I ended up doing with Maror, which is an epic. It's 150,000 words, something like that. And I realized I can actually use this technique very effectively to write very big books that don't have bloat, don't have the fat on them. I hate bloat. I think 90% of, people go, I've got a great idea, and then that idea becomes a whole novel when it should have been a short story. A single idea can't sustain a book. I mean, it can. Clearly people do it and it works well for them. But I just think if you have 100 ideas, throw them all in and make a book out of that.
If somebody's listening who is just getting started, how does that person know if what they've got here is an idea that is enough to grow more ideas? Or, because there's a danger of thinking that means we have to throw the kitchen sink in, that we have to... Every thought that's in your head needs to be in there. It isn't quite that, is it?
Well, there's no right or wrong answer, though. I mean, everyone has to sort of figure it out for themselves. And mostly it's by writing a lot of stuff that's not very good and that you don't show people, or you publish it in small magazines.
But you finish it.
But you finish it. Yeah. And I mean, that's one of the things I did when I started. I made myself finish things that I knew were not good, but at least they were finished. And you know what? I learned this from during the pandemic. I started making video games, or I started making games for mobile phones, basically. And, you know, and I was doing what every beginning writer does. Oh, I just need to fix one more thing. I just need to fix, you know, I just need. And then I read an article and it said, you know, 90% of people never make a game because they never finish it. And finishing a game means simply you need to put a loop in that says game over. Do you want to play again? That's all it is. That's the game loop. And 90% of people never get to that point because they're so obsessed with, as I became, with trying to make it as good as possible. I just have to move this thing 1 centimeter. As soon as I realized that, I was like, right, I'm not aiming for perfect. I'm just aiming for finished.
Yeah.
And so I made a bunch of games, and that, you know, they take even more time than writing. And I kind of thought, why am I doing this? But, you know, with ideas, I think one of the things that I did with Central Station that I really like was that I wanted to take all those ideas. You know, I wanted to take all the sci-fi, all the cool sci-fi stuff, you know, all the robots and spaceships, genetic engineering and this and that and whatever you want, and just chuck it all in the background and then just ignore it. Because that's not really important, you know what I mean? That's not what the story is really about. The story is about people living in that future. And so I wanted to just chuck it all in the background and ignore it as if it wasn't even there. But yeah, I mean, you can do single idea stories. You know, so that's a very classic science fiction thing to do. I mean, I keep thinking about the Adam Roberts book, you know, what if it started snowing and never stopped? You know, that's a very science. What happened? And then you work it out from there. You know, that's a very science fiction thing to do. Or the Ted Chiang one, you know, what if heaven and hell are real and you can see them? So that's very classical, that you just say, here's the idea, and now I'm going to work out the implications from it. I can only ever write that as a parody because I can't take it seriously. So I've done parodies of that. You know, I did one story as a parody called The God Beard. And he said, well, what if God is an old man who lives in the cloud and has a long beard, you know? Yeah. And of course, the story then becomes, well, how do we climb the beard to get to heaven, you know? And it becomes this whole expedition up the God beard, you know, with the parasites that live in the beard, you know, and all of this. And I was quite pleased with myself. And I put in this cheap emotional manipulation thing about, you know, it's a guy going to heaven to try and find his dead daughter, you know, and he tied it to the book of Job and all of that. I was quite pleased with myself. I was doing it to prove a point, basically. And I sent it to Ellen Datler, who published Ted Chiang originally. And of course, she was like, no. She could spot a fake, you know, she could spot a fraud at 100 meters. So I sent it to Strange Horizons and they accepted it. And then they sent me an edited manuscript with red ink or virtual red ink on every line. It was basically, when you say the hair of, you know, the God hair is 4 cubics, what does that actually mean? Like, how long? Have you worked out the calculations? You know, and I'm like, I'm not Ted Chiang. I'm just taking the piss here.
Yeah, and it's like, have you seen the Hebrew Bible? That's exactly where we're going from. We don't know how long a cubit is.
No, I know, but it's not important. That was my point. I was like,
but that is the point, isn't it? That is the point.
If Ted Chiang wrote it, he would have actually worked it out, you know, and he probably would have won the Year Golden Nebula for it. I was just doing it as a cheap joke, and I played for the cheap seats, you know.
If you are one of the writers out there who maybe is a little bit earlier on, are there any things you wish somebody had said to you?
I'll tell you what I did find when I was starting out, and I'm hoping it's better now. I found when I started doing events, panels, it's very hard to do when you're a nobody, so to speak, you know, and you can't back yourself up. I mean, having an award does help because at least you go, don't talk to me like that. I've got an award, you know, it gives you something. Mm-hmm. But I was thrown into panels where you had these older writers being absolutely horrible and domineering. And I would just say, don't listen to them. And the other thing that annoys me with that is writers who go on these panels or whatever, and they're the experts. Let me tell you how things are, you know, and whenever my turn comes after one of these guys, I say, don't listen to him. It's usually a him, let's be honest, but don't listen to him and don't listen to me. We don't know anything. We can't put our pajamas on the right way. Like, if we could, we wouldn't be doing this. We'd have a proper job, So don't listen to us. We're just idiots. We make stuff up. The other thing that I found is people who get a book sold or something, and they're being marketed as the next big thing, which is what happens to 90% of writers, edit, and you start believing it. And I think that's something you don't want to happen. If you finally sold that book and then everyone's saying you're the next whatever, you're not. Okay, you're not. 99%, 99.99%, you're not. George R. R. Martin wasn't George R. R. Martin until 60 years later. And so the level of the hype and then the reality that comes crashing down on you has been really interesting to watch, because I never started off as the next big thing. So I never had any illusions to be destroyed. I was always about just getting the work done. And I think that's all it really should ever be about. It's getting the work done. Everything else, I don't even enjoy anything else other than the writing. I enjoy getting invited overseas occasionally. But again, people start becoming fixated on the fact that they get invited to things or whatever. And I always think, well, if you don't invite me, I'm just going to stay home. That's going to be great as well. I don't need to go anywhere and do anything. It's nice if it comes along. It's a perk, but, I'm not that bothered. So I would just say, don't listen to the noise. Just get on with the work. And also, it doesn't have to satisfy anyone else other than yourself. Ideally, someone would buy it, an editor would publish it or whatever. But as long as you're happy with it, as long as not even happy, but as long as you're satisfied with it, as long as it's done something that you hoped it would do, that's all you really care about. I'm at the stage now where a book comes out, and I'm like, okay, so a book came, no one here cares that a book came out, oh, look, there's a book,
Is that the reception? You're pointing at the room as you say that? Is that the reception at home?
The people behind me. I cared about writing it. I don't even care about editing at that point, because that just ruins the original work I created. So at that point, it's not my book anymore. It's now a book for someone else to do something with. And eventually it comes out, and some people are going to like the book, and some people are not going to like the book, and most people are not going to care about the book or know it exists. And so ultimately, all you have at the end of the day is, was I happy with it at some point when I wrote it? Did that do something that I was pleased with? That's all that really matters. But I do like the big blinds, so thank you.
Thank you for that. The word you haven't used that was just on my mind a lot listening to you say that is keeping the curiosity, that it's about, are you interested? Is this the idea that you want to be developing and bringing into the world? So it's not about judging it by the response. It's not about judging it by what's somebody else going to think. It's, am I interested? Am I satisfied?
The response is meaningless. I did one comics. I did a 5-issue comics called Adler that came out during the pandemic, so it just vanished without a sight. But when it came out, and then the graphic novel came out, and I had a chat with the artist, Paul McCaffrey, who's a very good artist, and Paul said, he said, I thought the book would come out and people would either like it or they won't like it. And he said, instead, some people liked it, and some people didn't like it. And some people didn't care one way, and I don't understand that. I'm like, yes, Paul, that's literally everything you do. All you can ever hope for is that maybe more people like it than don't like it. But I'm also in the position, because of the books I write, I like it when people don't like it, or when it really annoys them anyway. Because that's also a response.
How come?
The response you don't want is, I didn't really care. It was okay. I don't want it was okay. I want books that say, I really hated this. It's just because it clearly got a reaction from someone. Something annoyed them, something prodded them with it. And I mean, in a way, less interested in it, I really loved it because, good, of course you did. It's like, it's great. I'm not getting anything useful out of it. You see what I mean? The reason I like A Man Likes Dreaming so much is because also the reviews, if you look at the reviews from readers saying this is an absolutely disgusting, filthy, horrible, monstrous book. I loved it. Or this is a great book. I wouldn't recommend it to anyone. You
get this a lot. You've found your people. You found they found the book for them.
They but I understand that, because I would say this book is not for everyone, and if you are offended by it, I would understand that. I have no problem with it. But I love the fact that people kind of go, this is horrible and it's great, and I'm like, yeah, that's what I was going for. That's totally what I was going for. That was all planned. That wasn't,
You have a website I can direct people to, don't you?
Yeah, I'm on Blue Sky. I'm on Instagram, actually, weirdly. It's just my name, so it's Lavie Tidhar. And my website is, I think, lavietidhar.wordpress.com, which gets updated at least 3 times a year. I mean, that's the problem with my books, is you can kind of sum them up in the worst way with 3 words. Osama bin Laden. What was the Osama one? Osama bin Laden, Pulp Hero. They're quite... Clown Western. Just Google Clown Western.
Just Google Clown Western.
There's only one. Read it.
There's only one.
I was literally pushing that book into people's hands at World Fantasy Con in Brighton. I was like, just read this one. It's clowns.
Lavie Tidhar, thank you so much for joining us at the Writers' Gym.
Thank you.
You've visited the Writers' Gym with author and coach Dr Rachel Knightley. Production and sound design are by Ashley Lexine, and theme music is by Chris Gregory. To join a Writers' Gym workout online or in London, as a guest or as a member, visit writersgym.com or email thewritersgym@rachelknightley.com.